this video, I will show that Hong Kongers use freedom and democracy as a pretext for racial hatred and Cantonese imperialism. On the surface, the Hong Kong protesters portray themselves as the victims of a tyrannical Communist Party who are acting to erode the freedoms of Hong Kong, and in response to this so-called oppression, they protest for the grand cause of democracy, human rights, and freedom. The irony here is that the Hong Kong people are more so victims of liberal capitalism rather than Chinese communism. As a quick internet search will show, Hong Kong has remained as one of the top 3 countries with the most economic freedom. That is even more than the United States in the Index of Economic Freedom since its handover to China in 1997. The problems of ridiculously expensive housing prices and an exorbitant cost of living were not a direct consequence of the Chinese Communist Party's actions, but rather are a natural occurrence arising from the basic capitalistic principle of free market supply and demand. As I will show, this cause of freedom, democracy, and human rights that the Hong Kong protesters are fighting for is merely a ruse, and belie their true desire to establish the Cantonese as a superior race and incite hatred against Chinese Mandarin speakers who have no affiliation with the Chinese Communist Party whatsoever. In fact, it is the Hong Kong people who have disrespected and violated Western political principles by transforming the land to which they were invited into Hong Kong territories, where everything is conducted in Cantonese. For instance, the beautiful cities of Vancouver, or should I say Hongcouver, and Richmond, British Columbia in Canada now have a significant number of public signage in Cantonese as opposed to English, the native language of the country. The Cantonese speakers who reside there have no intention of learning English to a proficient level, set up businesses in Cantonese, and continuously publicize material in Cantonese to the exclusion of English speakers. Secondly, these Cantonese businesses engage in discriminatory employment practices whereby only Cantonese speakers are hired and provided adequate training, and English speakers are not. Even if an English speaker by any chance is hired, they do not enjoy the same level of inclusiveness as a Cantonese speaker would, as the Cantonese person would be granted more training, more responsibility, and higher pay solely because of the fact that he or she is from Hong Kong. This is largely due to their desire to empower and enrich the Cantonese over non-Cantonese, as they seek to establish the Hong Kong Cantonese as the master race who reigns supreme. Secondly is the incitation of hatred against mainland Mandarin speakers, who may be themselves victims of the Communist Party's authoritarian regime. Although I will admit that the Chinese Communist Party is fascist, autocratic, and dictatorial in a vein that is similar to the Soviet Union, the Chinese Communist Party has not went to the extreme lengths of committing the Hong Kong people to facilities of torture, such as concentration camps. As a matter of fact, the Hong Kong people have not borne the brunt of the police brutality that takes place in America. I am not defending the Chinese Communist Party, but rather I am trying to show that the acts of retaliation committed in response to China's offenses are grossly disproportional to the degree of some of the perceived transgressions of mainland Chinese, some of whom have no say in the general direction of the Communist Party. To go as far as to assault a person for expressing a view or opinion that is contrary to the attacker's own beliefs amounts to bigotry and intolerance, which in the West is not something that is condoned. The Hong Kong people do everything in their position to humiliate, denigrate, and demean Mandarin-speaking Chinese by promoting racist hate speech such as calling Chinese people locusts and referring to China by the derogatory slur Xina. I would like to point out that the Hong Kong protesters selectively pick the aspects of a particular ideology to use as a claim for power for Hong Kongers and only Hong Kongers in the case of freedom and democracy, but failed to respect the rights and freedoms of non-Hong Kongers. Indeed, when a non-Hong Konger exercises the right to free speech and freedom of opinion, a protester attacks that person for not submitting to the Hong Kongers' assertion of dominance. Simultaneously, Hong Kongers pick the aspects of a reprehensible ideology to smear and besmirch their enemy, which in this case would be associating China with Nazi Germany. They do this by branding the nation as Xi-Nazi. Nevertheless, the Hong Kong people espoused World War II ideologies of imperialism held by the Axis powers, which include Nazi Germany and Imperial Japan as allies. The term Shina was coined by the Japanese as a derogatory racial slur for China during its invasion. When Hong Kongers co-opt the racial slur Shina for their own use against Mandarin Chinese, they are in effect being racist and acting like Nazis themselves. What we have here is the ultimate display of hypocrisy by the Hong Kong protesters, who are abusing Western ideals of freedom, democracy, and human rights for their own purpose of achieving Cantonese imperialism and domination. Neither I nor anyone should sympathize with the Hong Kong protesters and their cause, since it has been tainted by their own acts of racism, discrimination, and hate-mongering against Mandarin Chinese in the same manner as the Nazis who had published anti-Jewish rhetoric and propaganda. At the very least, the Chinese Communist Party does not publish material that promotes hatred against Hong Kongers, nor does it even portray them as evil conspirators as the Nazis had done. But Hong Kongers, in promoting anti-Chinese hatred and prejudice, are just as guilty of Nazism, if not more, as China. This concludes our discussion. And the final point. I would like to convey is that Hong Kongers are not worthy of being a U.S. ally, because not only have they failed to adequately adhere to Western liberal principles, but they have twisted and defiled such sacred ideals for the purpose of enabling the Cantonese to dominate and humiliate non-Cantonese.